Hey guys, Kevin here, Life22, and today we are reviewing The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, right? So, I joined the Third Thursday book club with Ben Shapiro, and he was reading this past month in February, or this current month, but he goes from the third Thursday to the next third Thursday. So, we've already missed the deadline for that one. I just recently finished The Adventures of Tom Sawyer because I didn't want to start with the second book, so I started with the first book. And I hadn't read, I think the only one I read was Tom Sawyer Detective, which is the third book in the series, which I read over a summer reading program when I was a kid. And it was like the only Tom Sawyer Mark Twain book that wasn't banned by the school district. So, yeah, it had been banned, and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. They weren't in our libraries. They weren't part of the reading curriculum because they contain the N-word. And the first one contains like the N-word like 3 times, which I'm just started the next book in the series, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which a glimpse into how people talk. The N-word is like, 18 times in like the first chapter. And it's just, it is what it is, right? Like, it's not open sesame, you know what I mean? Like, it isn't like, it's just a word. And I'm sure people are going to yell at me for that, but oh well. But it truly is in the context of little boys telling a story of their adventures and trying to describe somebody, right? Like if the word, they weren't saying it in a knowingly derogatory way, as in like that lady has red hair, and the word red hair is treated like the N-word, and you can't describe, and then you have to start tiptoeing around how you describe the lady's hair without calling it red. And it's like, how do you go about doing that? Because even in today's society, like, everybody tries to make you feel uncomfortable if you're not black and you say the word black, African American, or I have friends that don't like the word African American, but they don't give a crap if you call them colored. But that's, you know what I mean? A lot of other people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. That came from the era where the N-word was thrown around, and you can't say that. And so it becomes this big to-do, and in it all, you have to, like, tiptoe around people trying to guess which one they want to, you know what I mean? But there's no issue with, hey, I don't get, hey, Kevin. I usually get, hey, white boy, from a lot of my friends, so it's like, why, what's the difference? You know what I mean? Like, I guess it is what it is. But anyway, so that was the reason why the book was not available to me as a child, and I'm listening to it now as an adult, and I don't know, it is interesting. It was To Kill a Mockingbird-esque in that, like, spoiler alert, the boys in the middle of the at the beginning of the book see a murder happen at a graveyard, and they keep their mouths shut, and they're very superstitious, and they're very religious, and they're very, boys of that era, right? Like, they believe in a lot of that weird, Southern boy stuff, right? Like, you gotta, in order to get rid of the hiccups, you gotta take a dead cat to the graveyard and boo-hoo the witches away and tell all the witches and the devils that they can't have you, and then you gotta give them the dead cat, because then they can take the cat's soul, or it scares the devil out of them, because cats scare the devil. Like, it's real, like, alright, I can see how a little boy could fall down one of these rabbit holes, well, there's just one way to do it, and this is the way to do it, and you know what I mean? Like, you just... And you get introduced to his Tom Sawyer's buddy, Huck Finn. And Huck Finn is this little boy whose dad's drunk and gone off on his own. So he's just a little homeless boy, lives by the river, and he smokes, and he talks like trash. And, all the parents say, hey, stay away from little Huck. And Tom hangs out with Huck because Tom's a little rabble-rouser. He's the Kevin Doherty of his era, and, Huck teaches them how to smoke, and they're the same age. They're what, like 8-year-old boys, and 8-year-old boys are gonna do what 8-year-old boys do, and it's one of those things. And it was kind of it was an interesting book. And then they Tom Sawyer finally breaks down and buckles at the trial, and they point out that Injun Joe was the one who killed the doctor, and it wasn't Old Man Porter or whatever, the drunk. And and there again, there's another name like Injun Joe. Is somebody's going to say that's racist? Well, I was explaining this to one of my kids when I was explaining to them the story, and it was funny. I was like, I mean, the word Indian hasn't quite become racist yet. There's a lot of people that probably tell you that the word Indian is racist because they're Native American, because they were native to North America, and what Christopher Columbus thought he just run aground on the eastern coast of India. He must have got turned around and he crashed into India because these people look like people from India, and that was the thought process. And then they became, then people just started saying, well, those are Indians. You know what I mean? Like, that's where the big discrepancy became. Indians from India or Indians from North America. Then they became Native Americans, and then they stopped. And then you have a bunch of kids like Huck Finn who don't read so good, and they use words like Injun because that's how they heard it from an adult who didn't speak so good. And then, so like literally, it's like if somebody called me, hey, white boy, and then somebody else was like, hey, white boy, like, Hawaii boy, is that more racist than calling me white boy? Like, no, it's not. It's just somebody's just an idiot and mispronounced it. Like, it's one of those things. So, yeah. So, I mean, the book was very interesting. And the second one's coming in there. It's getting a little more interesting. It's getting, the boys found money in the first one. Now the second one, the dad's coming around. And I'll save that for the second book. I can't spoil alert it on you. But it is an American classic. It is something that you should read, regardless on your feelings on words. Because sticks and stones can break your bones, but names can never hurt you. And, I bet you a phrase like that, after reading The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, leads me to believe that Tom Sawyer would probably be somebody who would say something like that, because they have all these little, like, where you put the rabbit's foot in your back pocket and you say the incantation and your sniffles go. Like, a lot of, what I mean? A lot of, like little kid stuff. And, little kids' rhymes that are tossed at them by their parents so they don't have to worry about, some other kid calling you names. You just come up with a rhyme, give it to your kid, there you go, boom. And you got a little Tom Sawyer around there just spitting it out. So, American classic, not a bad read. I recommend it. The school district shouldn't have got rid of it over a word. It would have acclimated kids to understanding that words are out there, but they're not appropriate to say. Given in a society where most parents I see dropping their kids off at school or picking their kids up from school are dropping the F-bomb left and right, like hitting their kids upside the head and just going like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Like, stuff like that. That stuff is happening all the time. But you can't use other words in art. Like, it's like, if you're going to start policing a few words, you have to police all the words. And, like, there should be some moral standard. And it's that moral degradation to our society that is causing things that caused words like the N-word to exist, right? Like, we're stepping backwards because we're like, oh, well, you can't say that because that was bad to one group of people. And then you sit there and then you let everybody's treat their kids like garbage, and you let a lot of parents say the F-bomb around their kids, and then as those kids get older, they teach the F-bomb to my kids, and my kids come home more rebellious and be like, well, Jimmy said that I can say the F-word to you, Dad, because, bam, that's right. I don't have to listen to you. Jimmy's parents told him they don't have to listen to him. I don't have to listen to you because the rules apply to all kids. You know what I mean? Then you get one of those arguments with your kids, and then you have to, it like makes your job tougher as a parent, and hopefully you can, hopefully you don't succumb to the pressures of these, the degradation of somebody else's family. And that's where society is going as a whole. And the next thing you know, you do have groups of people being racist and intolerant towards one another. And it's all stems from the fact that there's less accountability to parents to not do their job, right? Like, my job is to be a good parent, not drop the F-bomb in front of my kids, teach them right from wrong, you know, a lot of different things like that. And actually, I heard a thing the other day that you don't have to spend a lot of time teaching your kids right from wrong. The immersion of your society does that. Like, when you're trying to learn a new language, you immerse yourself in that culture, and you start, you know, like, you can pick up Spanish a lot faster than reading a book if you immerse yourself in a Spanish-speaking culture and things like that. So, I mean, like, if you're in a culture that, you know, morality is skewed from where you see it, it's going to be a lot harder for you to skew your kids back to knowing the difference between right and wrong. And that's the true issue with our society. You know how you solve it? I don't know. I haven't given it a lot of thought, but Pop Fly here in the middle of my review on Tom Sawyer is you hold parents more accountable. They used to shame. Now, I know a lot of people don't like fat shaming, but fat shaming's always worked for me and my friends and people I know, because if you didn't shame them, they would continue to be body imperfect, and then that's the new terminology. But then guess what? Then they, you know what I mean? Like, most of my, you know, like, I could name 4 friends that their parents, like, are going to or have died of, like, being obese. And it's like, man, if they, you know what I mean? We've lost a couple friends to being obese. You know what I mean? It's like, if you didn't shame them away from it, what are they going to commit suicide? They're already committing suicide. It's a slow, like, innocuous death that they have to go through because they are not taking their time and, like, learning how to be healthy and eat healthy and things like that. And I know we all have our vices, but if you watch this channel, you can see all throughout our channel where we end up going through and doing stuff like Fit February, jump into January, sober October, like, we alternate April, where you pick an alternate path and just keep your mind constantly changing. And that's the issue. So going back to the shaming, when you were a drunkard and walked down the street, the neighbors would shame you. They would be vocal about it. They would say, "What the hell is wrong with you, you goddamn drunk? You're going to give the kids a bad impression. They're going to think it's okay to do what you're doing." And you just kind of, like, verbally shun out the moral reprobates of society and letting people know that their behavior is not acceptable. And sometimes you have to, that's why, like, these Twitter mobs are going after people. They're doing it in the same way, except they're doing it for a different motive. So they're, like, shunning people for standing up for freedom of speech and stuff. And that's why, like, guys like me, I have to come back and be like, wait, there's so many people yelling at me. What did I do wrong? And then I have to, like, mentally regroup and say, wait a minute, I haven't done anything wrong. I was speaking my mind. I was utilizing my freedom of speech. I was standing up for my rights. There was nothing that I did wrong except for somebody thought that they should wear a goddamn mask and that I should too, and that they have the right to tell me that I have to wear a mask and it's not their right to do that. And so I wasn't in the wrong, but it does emotionally and, like, internally make you feel like you've done something wrong when a mob of people come to you ready for a lynching, and you're the victim. You're like, oh my God, what did I do? And you didn't do anything wrong. But that same power that's held by that mob, that group of people, that the people that'll stand up to you and say, listen, what you're doing is not correct for the betterment of our society. And when it makes you feel like, wow, what did I do wrong? Like, oh, maybe I shouldn't walk down the street like a drunkard. Maybe I shouldn't hit the back of my kid's head and call him a little fuck. Like, maybe you shouldn't do stuff like that. And maybe it clicks. Or maybe 7 more people have to tell you that and make you feel like garbage. Or maybe it'll get through to your kid when they're only slightly less fucked up than you are, and you think that's appropriate, and somebody gets through to them, and it takes a couple generations to fix those problems. Maybe. There's theories with Kevin. So, highly recommend Mark Twain, The Adventures of Huck Finn, or The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. We'll get back to you next time on The Adventures of Huck Finn, because that is the next book we're listening to. Then we're going to take a break from the series, and we're going to jump into the next Thursday book so we can try to keep up and read Ben's notes and I highly recommend if you're going to join a book club. Ben Shapiro breaks it down great. And Ben Shapiro also, in his most recent interview with Niles Ferguson, mentioned the whole immersion into culture and how your kids get immersed in culture, and how that helps where parents don't really have to teach morality because they're conveying it, and so does the society around them as they convey it. So, but we'll catch you guys next time on the book review. And before the book I'm listening to ends, I have a feeling you're going to see me before you want to on the 1st of March, which is this coming Tuesday, for our end of month theme, our ending of February theme, and our intro to March's theme. So we'll catch you guys on the flippy flop.